Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to Reporters here on France 24. I'm Mark Owen. In this edition, an island evacuated in the face of a hurricane, an island now deserted and destroyed. The entire population of Barbuda in the Caribbean was airlifted out before a second devastating storm struck. Only one life was lost, miraculously, when Category 5 Hurricane Irma struck in September 2017. The rapid arrival of another hurricane triggered that exodus of all 1,800 inhabitants for their own safety. Climate change could be judged responsible for turning this dream island into a nightmare. We've met the people who've lost everything. We ask, how can Barbuda now be rebuilt? Our reports by François Cardona, Vincent Rambaud and Harold Grenouille.
Early morning in St. John's Harbor on the island of Antigua in the Caribbean. 40 people are getting ready to board. The passengers are residents of the neighboring island of Barbuda. For the first time since the hurricane, authorities have authorized them to return to their island to assess the damage. They've become the first people in the Caribbean to be displaced because of climate change.
It's nice to be going home.
Royce and Richard.
57-year-old Randolph is a retired professor. He's brought a lot of water and products for basic survival. No one here knows what to expect.
Lots of strength. Barbudans are resilient people, strong, right? And I'm sure with that and God's help, we will get there. I'm hoping that we get to see our property and to make sure we know where we go from here. We expect the worst.
Barbuda is 2 hours by boat from Antigua. But everyone on this visit knows it will never be the same. They are climate survivors.
Man, the wrath of God came down on Barbuda. We had, 187 miles per hour wind sustained. I think I've never really witnessed anything like that in my entire life. I've been here in 1995 when Hurricane Louis, and that was nothing in comparison to this one.
It was at the beginning of September.
That monster hurricane, the strongest ever on record in the Atlantic Ocean, slamming into the Caribbean already, turning deadly, ravaging islands.
Irma was classified as a Category 5 hurricane, the highest rating. Its peak wind speed was measured at 295 kilometers per hour, razing this Caribbean island to the ground.
This image coming in, that's the eye again, but in the middle there, that is the island of Barbuda. Authorities there late this afternoon reporting at least 90% of the buildings on that island could be gone now.
The worst was still to come. Another hurricane heading towards Barbuda. The authorities took an unprecedented decision to evacuate the whole population, 1,800 people, by plane to the neighboring island of Antigua. This morning, a handful of residents will try to assess the damage.
Pumpkin, where got back a drop.
Since the hurricane blew over, no efforts to rebuild have been made yet. Almost none of the infrastructure survived. The island is still uninhabitable. A month after the disaster, there is still no water, no electricity, a deserted island, a ghost town.
This is remarkable that we had no deaths or stuff in Barbuda. There's a total destruction, man. This area was the main part of Barbuda. This is called Madison Square Garden. And we had the bars, the cook shops, the beauty salons, everything. That's that area.
And this is his house. Its roof is one of the few that resisted the storm.
Oh my God, it's so nice to see. Thanks, guys. Yeah, cool. Okay. Thanks, man.
Before leaving the island, the house was sealed to prevent pillaging.
Knock the glass out. Everything is dry. 14 people in here the night of the hurricane because their houses were suspect. And so they came here, and the morning after, their house gone.
Over the past few months, a series of hurricanes have hit the Caribbean. Irma, Jose, and Maria. Unusually extreme weather conditions. Randolph is convinced that it's due to climate change.
Yeah, I do believe in that, the climate change. I think we're the guinea pigs. The future planning can use us as an example and know what to do from here on. You know, green energy, we need to adapt to the changes.
Barbudians have become the latest people displaced by climate change, made homeless by hurricanes. Nothing can withstand their force. Tyrene lost everything. Today's her birthday. She's 73. She goes back to her shop, a stationery and hardware store. It's destroyed.
I don't even know what to do. I just want other people over the world to see what happened to us, and if we did only get to come in a week after the hurricane, we could have saved a lot of these stuff. But they wouldn't allow us to come in. They hold us in Antigua and wouldn't allow us to come back to save our stuff.
The roads were only cleared a few days ago, according to the authorities. The small country of Antigua and Barbuda doesn't have the means to rebuild everything. Today, the island is still cut off from the rest of the world. The control tower has been destroyed. Now, the army is responsible for law enforcement. This morning, their leader is Sergeant Hannes. He's in charge of the plane's risky landing.
So there's basically no telecommunication except communication between here and base, basically, and it's just to facilitate and ensure the safety and security of every person involved.
A month after the tragedy, there are very few international NGOs operating in Barbuda. Samaritan's Purse, an American charitable organization, is the only one to own a plane. This morning, they bring equipment to purify water. It is vital for the residents.
They will need to do their own bits because the wells that they drank from before will be contaminated. The rain, the dead animals, and the water table change will change the value of the water in terms of its portability.
Nobody wants to come with me.
I'll see you off. I'll see you clear behind you.
Thank you.
I think I can hear another aircraft.
Barbuda is now isolated, forgotten by the rest of the world. All of its inhabitants have been displaced to Antigua. Antigua was spared the worst of the hurricane. After the tragedy, a solidarity movement came together to help the refugees. The Barbudians who haven't been accommodated by relatives stay at a public stadium. A few hundred people are living there, men, women of all ages, and dozens of children. Now rootless, their lives put on hold, refugees have organized themselves. Everyone has a specific task: cleaning, food supply, cooking. Unique and Akeem, who are 9 and 10 years old, are brother and sister. They're wearing clothes that were donated.
I miss my bag with all my beautiful books and my shoes. I miss the island. And I miss my clothes. Even though my TV keeps cracked up. A big screen TV. And it has one side big and one side, and everything goes into it.
This is where Mary Ann lives with her 4 kids, in a changing room transformed into a dormitory, shared by 13 people, 5 adults, and 8 kids for over a month and a half.
If I get somewhere to come out of in here, I move out of in here from in this room. They have a lot of liar people in here, and people is thieving people things.
Despite the overcrowding, what was supposed to be a temporary solution is becoming permanent. Every morning, the children leave the stadium to go to school, without knowing when they'll go back to Barbuda. Reconstruction will cost around $250 million, more than a quarter of the annual wealth of this small island state. The Prime Minister has asked for international help. He agreed to speak with us.
Hey, gentlemen, sorry about the wait. Had a busy day. Yeah, good day. Okay, how are you?
Gaston Brown has been warning about global warming for years. He now calls for the solidarity of rich countries, who are the ones to blame, according to him.
I have to admit that we've been seeing some South-South cooperation, but beyond that, the larger countries have not quite stepped up. And as I said before, they are really the profligate users of fossil fuel. So clearly, they're contributing to climate change, to warmer seas, more frequent and ferocious storms or hurricanes. And at the same time, we're not seeing that type of responsibility in terms of assisting in loss and damage.
So how long will it take to rebuild Barbuda? Months? Years? International aid is slowly starting to arrive on the island. Today, there's a high risk of infected mosquitoes spreading the Zika virus, which is extremely contagious, and also dengue fever and cholera. The Army has launched a series of fumigation operations, and residents are organizing themselves to save what they can.
The bush, jog around the front.
Wilson is a fisherman. His 3 boats have been swept away by the hurricanes. He wants to bring them back to Antigua to fix them.
The boat was anchor, mooring, push, here.
And you have insurance and everything for that, or no?
The economy is bad. Can't afford insurance. We barely make a living day to day. You understand? So we're just trying to see what we can do to get back to work. But it's not possible to ignore, you understand? Yeah. Because we don't know when some aid might come. Maybe I can't fix, I don't know, but we have to do.
Not giving up, staying hopeful for the future. That's the new challenge for the small grocery shop on the island, which just reopened its doors. Just a few hours each day. Lil Rose and her husband Lincoln are the only ones who've bought a generator to power a small refrigerator.
The most important thing is to get the community back together.
I will run the shop so that it will encourage people to come back to Barbuda. Because people don't want to come because there's nothing. Barbuda is really mashed up. If it's encouraged, we will build back Barbuda. If we encourage each other and we get assistance, because if we don't get no assistance, it's not possible.
Will the residents be able to come back from their forced exile? To rebuild their island? With climate change, hurricanes may become more frequent and violent in the Caribbean. From now on, residents will have to live with the threat of imminent destruction. Barbuda remains on the front line, unprotected.
Our reporter Francois Cardona joins us now for more on this story. Francois, thank you for your film. Incredibly interesting and touching as it was. But I'm wondering now, where is the money and the expertise going to come from to try to rebuild Barbuda?
The UN Secretary General visited the island in October to see the scale of the damage for himself. And the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda expressly asked him to help them get low-interest international loans to pay for reconstruction efforts. The Paris Accord, signed in 2015, established compensation mechanisms for loss and damage for the most vulnerable countries, like Antigua and Barbuda. But negotiations are slow, and Barbuda needs the funds urgently.
For many people, such as those you met who've lost basically everything, it must be a very overwhelming time. And it's easy to see that some people may never get over this. Some people may never actually want to return. That, again, another problem that needs to be overcome.
We have to hope that the pace of reconstruction will accelerate, but at the latest count, barely 10% of residents have come back to the island. If these people don't come back to clean up and rebuild their homes, the island is likely to remain uninhabitable for several months. The people of Barbuda are still staying in Antigua, and they will stay there certainly until the beginning of next year, perhaps even longer, because the government has just started renovating a number of buildings in Antigua to rehouse the displaced people in the long term. All the Barbudans we met want to go home, of course, but they don't know when that will be.
François Cardona, we to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. We look forward to hearing how those people get on. François Cardona, our reporter there on the island of Barbuda, devastated by 2 hurricanes and, of course, now facing the difficult task of trying to rebuild. This is Reporters on France 24. Do stay with us.